All right, today we are going to be starting with the JavaScript that we can use to manipulate the content on the page. Everything that I've been talking right from chapter 1 all the way to chapter 7 is all about JavaScript in general. So whether you are doing front end or you are doing back end or you are using JavaScript anywhere, these are the fundamental stuff that you need to know. They are the basic stuff you need to know about. But this chapter 8, chapter 9, and all the way to chapter 10, this is something that is majorly from the browser. So this is JavaScript that runs on the browser. Even though you can use JavaScript outside of the browser, but everything we're going to be talking about under the DOM is all about how you can manipulate, using JavaScript to manipulate the content you have on the page. So we have this DOM, which is just the document object model. We've talked about the object. Object is what you use to model entities like person. Now, in another person, you can have their name, their age, and so forth like that. So JavaScript or the browser is giving off objects that it's using to or to represent everything that we have on the page. So everything on the page, JavaScript have a specific object or this special object that owns all the necessary information about what you have on the page. And through this object, you can manipulate the content on the page. So the browser gives us this object, which is the one that is kind of relatively close to the content you have on the page in the form of a tree. And through that object or through our JavaScript, we can manipulate the content on the page. And when you are dealing with the manipulation of the content on the page, we have this short word which is we call CRUD. So we have something known as CRUD. And when you are talking about CRUD, CRUD just means create, read, update, and delete. So these are the major action that you are going to be performing on the page. For example, here now we can read this content, then manipulate it and change it to something else, which is update. So you can read something that is not there before, you can create it too. So which is going to be under the create, and something that is there before, you want to remove it. For example, you have a site or you have a page where user can input their to-do list. So from that to-do list, those information are not there before. User have to type it inside the box, and once they type it, then it start displaying those content there. So you are creating the content, and again, too, later on, you can always update any of the info. But how do you do all this thing? So in JavaScript, you need to be able to target the element on the page. Before you can manipulate anything, before you can perform any manipulation on the content on the page, you must have access to the content on the page. And how do you have access to the content on the page? So don't forget this document object model. This is the object the JavaScript is giving to us, and it's there. You don't need to do anything. It's always on the browser. As long as you are loading this JavaScript code on the browser, you are going to have access to this document. So this document now is the one that owns everything which is representing the content that we have on the page. And as you can see here, so expanding it, so it have a lot of properties, the method, and some other things you can use to manipulate. As you can see here now, this is body. So this one holds, as you can see, it gives us access to all the body that you have there. So going back to the HTML, so everything that is inside this body, from here, we can have access to it under the document. But that's not all. As you can see, it have all. Again, it gives you, can you see, everything we have on the page. So the HTML, the head, the meta, the title, the link, you can manipulate anything that you have on the page. But we are not going to be going through it like this, because most of the time, you already know the element you want to pick on the page. For example, like this one. You don't want to be going through all of them to be looking for this particular one. So document gave us different ways of getting the content that we have on the page. So document, it gives us access to everything that you have on your page. So this document is the object, and through this object, you can access different methods under it there like that. And one of the major methods that you need here is for us to be able to select any element on the page. When you say select, it means you want to get that element, like from your HTML, the element you have in your HTML on the page, you want to have access to it inside your JavaScript so that you'll be able to manipulate it. And we have different ways of getting the element. So we have this method that you can use. So you can get element by the ID of that element. And what does it mean? It means that on your page somewhere, just like the way you used to select your this thing there, so you have a particular ID on that element. For example, this is the main content like this, or let me just say M like that. So through this ID now, I can get to this element from JavaScript, and that's where this document.get element by ID. What do you put there is the ID of the element that you are looking for. So if you want to get this element now, so let me save it from our code to have access to it. What we can just do here is console, then log, then document, then dot. Don't forget, when you're dealing with object, you use dot to access what is there. But you know, you're not the one that is creating this document. It is given to us by the browser so that we can manipulate the content on a page. And one of the functionality or the method is given to us is get element by ID. So this one will allows you to target any element that you have on your page from JavaScript. So if it is this H1 and you have ID on it, so I can go back to that page. So this is the H1, so I can come here and give it ID like this, then heading. So through this ID now, you can target the element in your JavaScript. So right now, the one I'm targeting is just the M, which is the main. So save and go back to the page. So what JavaScript will do is that it will go to the page, locate the element that matches that ID, and as you can see, it's giving us that we are targeting this. And if you expand it, as you can see, all the methods and properties. So this every element you have, we have all these properties that you can manipulate on that particular element. That I'm going to be showing you the one that are useful here. It's not everything they are going to be working with, but those ones that are useful, they are going to be using day in, day out. I'm going to be showing you how you can use all this property and method. The same thing too if it is the header one that I want to, or the heading one. So press save it with that, and once you get to the page, as you can see now, it's targeting H1. And if you scroll down, you see the content because it has access to everything from it. So if you scroll down to what we are going to be using later on, which is on this inner HTML, can you see we are able to get the content of this heading that we have there like that. So whatever you have inside that element, you'll be able to have access to it. But if you put something that is not on the page, for example, I just put H or whatever stuff here. So what it will do is that look for any element that have this particular, the first one that it can find on the page that have this ID. But if none of them is having ID, you see that can you see all those types that we've talked about before? So you get null. So what you get here is null or undefined, depending on the method you are calling. But for ID, as you can see, the value is returning is null. When what this thing is telling you that element you are looking for, there's nothing like that on the page. So which means there is no element with this particular ID on the page that we are trying to access. But it's not only through the ID, because it's not every time you are going to be giving all your element ID because you want to select them. So we have other ways of targeting your element. And these are the two ways that I love to use a lot. So we have this query selector here. So this one allows you to select based on CSS selector. So this one allows you to select as if you are dealing with your CSS. You know, in our CSS, we have selector. As you can see here, we are targeting the image. So here, we are targeting, you can see we are targeting a particular class category. Here, we are targeting image that is inside content class. So the same thing you are doing here from your CSS, you can use it directly in JavaScript to target your element. You know, this one you're using it to target element that you want to apply the style. While here, you are going to be using it to target the element you want to have access to inside JavaScript. But it's not all the selector you have here that is supporting there. So it's not all of them. So there's some crazy selector that it only works in CSS. It doesn't work with JavaScript. But most of the time, you know, I told you, for every crazy selector, there's always a simple way of doing of targeting that element. But this query selector allows you to select element based on, as you can see here, it will look for any element that have this particular class card. You know, anything dot is a class. Again, too, you know, anything hash is the ID. So anything you are doing here, you have to do it as if you are doing CSS. You know, this one means that it's looking for direct A that is inside a particular element with ID nav. You know, anything hash, it means ID, which is something we've talked about under CSS there. So if you go back to CSS class, you are going to see all of them there. So if you want to target element now, instead of us using the ID, so we can use that query selector to target based on the class. But that's not the only way too. There's still other methods that you can use. But as you can see, you can get by class name directly. So here, you know that whatever you are passing here is just the class name. But I don't like to use this method like that, because it's kind of old. Even this get element by ID too, I don't really use it. What I normally use is this query selector, because it can do any type of selector for you. So whether it is ID or it is class or it is any other type of selector, it will always work, because I'm going to be using them soon. So query selector, please listen. Query selector, when you use it, if you have multiple elements that is matching this selector here, it will only return the first one. So when you're using query selector, so if you have multiple elements that have this particular class card, it will always return the first one. It will never return all of them. But if you need all of them, so that's where this query selector all comes in. So when you add all in front, it means whether it is there or it's not there, it will always return array like. It's not array, it will return array like. So which means this one always return multiple items. Why this one always returns single item? So if you know that is the first one you are looking for and you can have multiple of them, you just use this one. But if you know you can have multiple of them on the page and you need all of them, then you use query selector all. So that's the rules are there like that. All this stuff is in here. I'm going to be explaining all those one later on there like that. For example, here now, I have this. So on my page, you can see I have span here, and at the same time I have span here. So this is another span. So on the page, let me just comment this one out, and let me comment this one too out. So we can save all this in a variable. It's not a must. We just const all. Let me just say the first span like this. So from there we can use our document, then query selector. Don't forget we have two types of selector. We have query selector and we have query selector all. So if you use query selector, here what you pass is just CSS. As you can see, it's bringing also. I can just say span here because I'm selecting based on element. I'm not selecting based on class. But if you know it is class you are using, you know it have to start with dot. You know if it is ID, it have to start with hash and so forth like that. But I'm selecting based on element. Again too, so const all span like this. So all span. Now instead of when you use all, this one will give you all of them. Even though on the page there are multiple span, but since you are using selector, it will only give you the first one it can find. So which means that first one now, the first one we can find on our page is this. So this is the only one it will return. So it will never get here at all. But for that second one, it will include all of them. So save, go back to the page. As you can see, the first one is only returning the one of the category, which is the one we have like that. But if it is that query selector, can you see that it come back like array? But it's not array. As you can see, it is node list. This which means it doesn't have all the feature of our array. It's just like array. That's why we call them array like. They look like array, but they don't have all the features of array. So if you want it to be array, then you have to convert it to array by using these spread operators, which I'm going to be explaining soon there like that. When we need it, I will explain what is that spread operator. But for now, we don't really need it. So to get any element on the page, you can use any of these methods. So we have get element by ID, we have query selector, which I said I will be using, and this one, these two, I will be using them. And we have this get element by class name. This one is only targeting class. You cannot do any other thing. Whatever you put here, it will think it is class. But if you want to handle the stuff in a CSS way, you should always go with query selector, which is what I will always be using every time like that. So now that you've gotten your element inside your code, what do you want to do with it? So that's where you can, you read it, which is what we just did now. We just read. So after we've reading the stuff, so we can update or we can delete anything about that element. And for now, we're not deleting. What we just want to do is that let's target this our H1, but the content that is inside it here, we want to have access it in our JavaScript. At the same time, we want to change it to another thing from JavaScript. From HTML, what we have there is introduction to JavaScript. But inside our JavaScript file, we want to change the content to another thing. So how do you do it? So any element that is already on the page, the first thing you have to do is to get that element. You have to select that element first. So since it's already on the page, what we need to do is tell JavaScript, go to the page, look for this particular H1. Then once you have that particular H1, these are so stuff we want to do with that element. So how do you select? We've talked about it. So what we can just do here, we can just call it heading like this. So, and I'm going to be doing document, then query selector, document, query selector like this. And what am I looking for? I'm looking for a particular element with this ID heading. So now, once we have access to it, what do you want to do? So you want to get the contents of the heading. So when you want to get the content of the heading, there are different methods that you can use. So we have the inner text, and each one of them have the way they works. So we have the inner text, we have the text content, and we have this inner HTML like that. So each one of them have what they are doing. But most of the time, you always use this inner HTML, which is something I'm supposed to even put at the top. But let me start with this one. So what is inner text? So whatever the text you have inside your element is going to give you all of them. So for example here now, let me just save, let me show all of them like that. So let's show all of them so that we can see. You know, the first one is inner text, the second one is text content, and the third one is inner HTML. So what it will do here is can you see all of them? It looks like they are the same, but they are not the same because of the way the content is. That's why it looks. So look at it now. From JavaScript, we have access to the content of the elements we are working with. All right, so as you can see, we have introduction to JavaScript, introduction to JavaScript, introduction to JavaScript. Three of them are giving us the same thing, but they are technically different. Why? So all of them, what they do for you by default is to get you the content that you have inside that particular element you are working with. But there's going to be a problem with them when, like these two now, there's going to be a problem with them when the content you have there is not just text, it's containing other stuff. So the way it works, if it is just normal text that you have inside that your element, no problem. You are going to get the same thing for all of them. But if what you have there is now more than text, for example here now, this our tool, let's wrap it in a B tag. So which means, or let's just wrap it in this I tag for italics. So go to the page, our high now, as you can see, it is in italics. But look at the content that we are getting. So here, can you see, there is nothing like I tag beside it. It's only the last one that is giving us. So when you are using inner text, this one, if that element you are working with have another element inside it, it will remove all those elements. The only thing that will just be left is the text. So here, look at it. In our content, we have introduction. This is normal text. But to is not just normal text. It is wrapped inside this I tag. So inner text, any tag you have there, it will remove all of them. The only thing you will be left with is just only the text you have there. So it will strip off any whatever stuff you have there. It doesn't care about the tag. It will remove all the tag. And that's the reason why you see that there is no tag here. The same thing is what this one too is going to do. It's this text content. But the problem with this one is that the way you arrange it on the page, that's the same way it is going to bring the content on the page there like that. Why this inner HTML? As you can see from the name, inner HTML. Everything, the way you type it from the HTML, that's the same way it's going to come outside. So whatever tag you have there, that tag too is going to be part of the content you have there. And that's the reason why you see that we are getting the full stuff that we have inside the H1 there, because this our tool here, it is inside a specific tag. So anytime you have any tag, it will always remove it. So the same thing too, if I have this EM here like that, so row, and again just remove this one like that. So save it and go back to the page. You see that this our row too should be italics. But if you look at it here, can you see nothing like that? It will strip off any HTML code. But for inner HTML, that one, it will include everything the way it's been typed there like that. So the way you type things here, that same way it's going to come outside. Let me disable this prettier. I don't want the prettier to work right now, because if I just save that, it should for it to format the code. Let me see, and go back to the page. Can you see? So that's just what I'm trying to tell you with the text content. So the way you type everything on the page will still remain the same, along with all the spacing. But the problem with that, it doesn't give you the HTML code. No, it's the text. So this one, I'm talking about the second one. Most of the time, I don't use it. So this text content, it will give you everything the way you type it. So all this spacing, everything, normally HTML, it ignore all those spacing. That's why you see on the page, they are still on one line. But here, or they are still on one line, but there's a simple space in between. So all those big space that you have in your code, everything just converted to a single spacing. The same thing too with this text content. It collapses all those spacing. But text content, it doesn't collapse it. So all those spacing are going to be part of your output too. Because this is what you type in your code. This is what is inside code. But because the browser, it's managing all those space, removing unnecessary spacing. So that's why it's looking at it. But actually, this is what the final result of that page is supposed to look like by the time you get to the browser. But because the browser is to remove unnecessary space, then convert them to single spacing like this. So that's why this one too, you get the result like that. So for this one too, you are going to get all those spacing along with all the necessary HTML that you have there. So but most of the time, you don't really need all this, the way the thing is arranged here. What you need is the actual content. So most of the time, you don't use, when you need the text, you're going to be using inner text. When you need the text and the codes together, you're going to be using inner HTML. And if you need the structure, the way you type it, the text, along with the structure, then you're going to be using this text content. But most of the time, you only see me using this inner HTML because it can function like the other one at them, which means if there is no tag in between, it will just return it the way you type it. And if it's tagged, then it's going to return the tag too. But sometimes you only need the text. But 90% of the time, the way you type it, that's the same way you want it on the page, like that. So let me remove all these things so that we can go back to the former one, like that. And now if I go back to the page, you see all of them behave the same because it's just simple text and everything is on one line. So you will not see any difference in between them like that. But once you started adding more content, you see that things are going to change. The way the three of them works will be different like that. So I will always be using inner HTML to modify the content that we have inside the element there like that. So we have the text content and we have the inner HTML like that. Again too, you can always use them to modify the content. Now I told you, we want to have access to it, and at the same time, we want to change the content. Instead of it to be introduction to JavaScript now, what we are going to be doing is introduction to the DOM, which is the document object model. But we don't want to do it from the HTML. We want to do it from the JavaScript. So in order for us to do that, so instead of you accessing it, just like a variable. When you call your variable, it will give you the value. But when you use assignment operator, it will change the value. For example, here we have let a to be 5. If I do console then .log a like this, which is going to be a, it's going to give me the value. But on this line, if I do is a is 25 like this, that means we are modifying the value of a. The same thing too is what you are going to be doing with your element on the page too. So here we can just do heading then inner HTML is equals to this introduction or assigned to this. So introduction to JavaScript, or let's just say document object model like this. So what we are saying here is that whatever stuff, it doesn't care whether there is HTML code or it's normal text. Anything that is inside this place, you are replacing it with this simple text. So which means whatever you have there before, whether it's having a nested element or that element is really long, no matter how the stuff you put inside it, it will replace all of them with whatever you are doing inside JavaScript. And that's the reason why JavaScript is powerful, because you can use it to manipulate anything, remove what is on the page and replace it with another thing. And once we go back to the page and check, now as you can see, we now have introduction to document object model. So from JavaScript, we replace, you will not even see it in your HTML again when you expect to. This is what you are going to see because it has already removed everything there and change it to what we have here like that. So what I say here is that modify the content of what you have again too. If it have HTML code, it's going to interpret it. So here if I have EM like this, at this end I close the EM, so which means this our, or don't let me do it here. So in front of it, let me just put it like this. So let me come to the front like this. So I'm just going to do EM, then from there I'm going to do DOM like this. So why is it not moving? Where is it? So let me go up to view. Yeah, because it's supposed to move to left line. Yeah. So now save the code, go back to the page. You see that, can you see? So it has interpreted that particular code. You know what we type there is EM. But by the time you get to the page, it knows that that is italics emphasis there. So it has converted this into italic. Don't forget, when you're dealing with inner HTML, it will interpret any HTML code you have there. But if it is inner text, that one, it doesn't care about your code. You know, it only care about the text. So everything that I type like this, if it is inner text you are using to modify it, the way you type it here, that same way is going to show it on the screen there. So by the time you get back to the page, you see that everything we have on the page is going to, it doesn't interpret, it's only focusing on text, nothing concerning about HTML code. But if you want it to interpret HTML, which is for that, so you can use this in HTML. So this one, in your text, if you see any HTML code there, it will interpret and arrange the stuff properly there like that. So it will pass it and arrange it the way it's supposed to be on the page. So you can modify the content of your, so this is how to modify the content of your element. But the only thing, you know, the only thing we just change now is the content. But what if you want to modify the style too and some other properties on your element? You can do the same thing too there like that. But we have a better way of working with CSS. You can do it directly from JavaScript, but doing that, it will not give you all the autocomplete you normally have from CSS. So what we normally do there is to put all the CSS here, then from JavaScript we'll be adding the class or remove the class or add the ID that have the class here or remove the stuff. But you can actually do CSS directly from here. For example, you can just do element, the heading, so then the style. Under this style, then followed by whatever property you want to change. You know, in your CSS, so all those properties you normally work with. So this is flex, padding, display, flex direction, gap, and so forth. So everything will follow after this style. But the problem with it is that all those ones that have hyphen like this, you cannot, you know, I told you in JavaScript, you cannot have hyphen in the text because hyphen is doing something else. It's doing this. So in not underscore, what it uses is known as camel case. So it follows this pattern. The JavaScript follow this pattern where the words are separated by the capital letter like this. So here now, if you want to do background color, so instead of background and color like this, because you know you to treat background and color separately. So what you do is that all those CSS parts that you normally have hyphen, remove it, then the starting of the next word, capitalize that word. So this is what you are going to have. So with red. So if I want to apply the padding there now, so what I will just do is so it's going to be heading, so heading, then the style, then the padding left. No, normally padding left supposed to be padding hyphen left, but now it has gone up, so you can see. Yeah, but don't forget, all these things, you are not the one that create them. It's part of the browser. You know, we are dealing with document. Something is already on the browser, so you are not the one in charge. All these things has been created for you. Like that's why you see that it's not complaining, because those things are there already. You know, we did not define how inner HTML work. We are not the one that define how query selector work. We're not the one that create all those things. We're not the one that create document. Everything is working because they are part of what the browser is giving to us. And this is how the browser, as when you are the one creating your own, then you have the choice to do, when you are creating your own stuff, you have the choice. But this is the pattern. And each language they are dealing with, you have the way they used to handle their stuff. Assuming it's Python now, what you always see most is underscore underscore. But in JavaScript, this is a pattern you always see. But that doesn't mean you cannot use underscore too. But you only do things according to the convention, so that when you're working with people, they will understand what you are doing easily. Not that the other one will not work, but when you're working with people, it will be really easy to work with them because you guys have convention that you follow. So when you now see that stuff, you know this is what they are trying to do at that place. But that doesn't mean you can go your own way and do anyhow you want. Just like to be hard to work with people because you are not following the convention there like that. So that's the stuff. So here now, as you can see, we can modify the style. So say, go back to the page. The background color of this heading will change to red because that's the value. And as you can see, the way we are representing all this value here, you know, it's not like the simple way that you just be typing them like this. So here, things have to be in a quote. No, don't forget, any text have to be in a quote. You can't just type red. It will be taken as variable. So there, so go back to the page and check. You'll see that we're going to be having background color and the padding has been applied in different places. But this is wrong. This is really, really long. Here now, that this thing doesn't give you autocomplete like CSS that you are going to be having for the value. For example, if you are using flex and all that, you know, from CSS, it's kind of easy to work with it. So here now, what I can just do is to create a particular class here. So for example, I have this class heading like that. So heading class or heading text like that. So this is what I have. So what did I want to do here? I want to display it as flex. So display cannot type today. Display flex like that. So flex fxdc like this. This is just a shortcut in VS Code in CSS. Yeah. So fxdc, let me wait for it, or I can even type it in full because I'm recording, so that's why it's taking time, because recording is doing some crazy stuff behind scene. So assuming it's as you can see now, so fxdc, so that's where it's coming from, like that. So all this your CSS and stuff, they have shortcut that you can only type like that in. So if I want to do text all this thing now, flex this thing, align, justify. So JCC now, justify content center. So that's justify content center. So those are the stuff I normally. So it's kind of easy to work with here. So padding is going to be one area like that. So the background is going to be red and so forth. You know, you even see the color code by the time the VS Code is load and is done like that. There's update. I'm not updating anything right now, so it's still loading. So once it's done, you see that we are going to be having the red coming out, and once everything is done, it's quite easy. So what we can now do in this class now, we should be able to attach it on that element directly from JavaScript, not from HTML. Now, if you want to do it now, we can just come here, give it the class that heading text. But it's not every time that the class will be applied from the HTML. Sometimes the condition is depending on what is going on the screen. So JavaScript gives us the power that we can use to manipulate the class of your element. So instead of you manipulating the CSS directly like this, what you always do is create the class, then now attach the class on the element. So let me save all the code. So let me save all the code and go back to the page. We are not going to have anything yet, so that you can see what is going on. So go back to the page, and once you get to the page, as you can see, nothing is going on yet because that class is not on the H1, but we want to attach it from JavaScript. So how do you manipulate the element classes? So how do you manipulate the classes of your element? So you will have this goodies that JavaScript is giving us. So this class list is the one that holds all the information about the classes on that particular element. So you can add, as you can see, you can add any class to that element. You can remove if it is there before. You can toggle. Toggle means that if it's there, it will remove, and if it's not there, it will add. So contain, this one check whether it is there or not, which will return, as you can see, all the value we are getting back. So this one check, it will ask question, does this thing have active? So what you get back is either true or false. Then based on that, you can now carry out some condition or carry out some stuff. So how do we add? So what we can just do here is that heading, then we have the class list. Can you see? So anytime you have multiple words, they are always being joined together in this way. So class, then the next word, it will be capitalized. So we have the class list, then you can now add. So what are we adding? We are adding this particular class. So going back to the page, let me go back to the page, go to the HTML code there. So under the elements like this, so let's look for our H1 there like that. So where are you, main? So expand. So we have it. No, it's not here. It should be here. So as you can see, our H1, there is nothing like class heading text. But now, once I save the code and go back to the page and everything reload, you see that the class will be added to that element. And once the class added, no CSS will see it. And once CSS sees it, it will apply the style on that element. So go back there again to the section, then check the, can you see now? We now have class heading text. So through JavaScript, you can manipulate the class of any element by using this class list goodies that is given to us. So we can add. So if it's something that is there before, you can remove. So instead of add, what you can just do is remove. But you know, before we don't have it. So we just, so if it's that thing is not there and you try to remove, it's, this thing is forgiven here. So if it is not there and you try to remove it, it will just ignore and leave it because it's not there there. But now, you know, we have toggle. So if it is toggle, you know, that one we check whether it is there. So if it is there, what it will do, it will add. But if it's not there, then it will remove the stuff. So let me say we should see the class on the element because now we now, you know, toggle, that class is not there before. But if I go to the HTML, maybe you already have it from your HTML. So here I have the class, then I have the heading text. So now, since it's already there, toggle will see that it's there. So it will just remove it instead of adding. So now if you go back to the page, we're not going to be seeing this thing again once the stuff is done. Loading. Thing is still loading. What are you saving? VS Code. So once it's done loading there, you see that, can you see? It will not be there because that's the job of toggle. If it is there before, it will remove. But if it is not there, then it will add to the stuff. So let me just remove the stuff. So you can add multiple class, not just one. It can help you to add multiple like that. So this toggle like this, or this add rather. So this add, you can add multiple classes if you want like that. But you are going to be doing some things like that. But the way you do it, so you can add multiple, another class easily. It will pick all of them and add it to that element. Another thing with it is that the thing is smart. If that class is there before, it will not re-add it. It will just ignore. So it's really smart. It will check whether this thing is there before. If it is there, then that's the only time to just put it. But if it's not there, then it doesn't do anything because it's already there. So there is nothing to add. But assuming you are writing the code yourself, you have to be doing all this checking. But it's already there. JavaScript already give us all the necessary stuff that we need. So you don't need to re-add it. As you can see, so although can you see the two classes? So the first one and the second one, and you can add multiple classes at the same time. Can be one, can be two. Don't forget this is your method, and you know you can pass arguments or to the method, and based on that argument, it will do. Well, you know we are not the one that define this ad. The ad is created by the browser. So behind it, we don't care. Our own is just for this thing to work. But the reason why we talk about all this thing before is now you know what this one is doing. Like you know what this means. This is your parameter or the argument they are passing in. But you are calling the method here.